Adobe's been a beaten down stock this year in 2025. It's down almost 23% as I'm recording this video, while the S&P index is up closer to 15%. So that mismatch, that underperformance has investors concerned, and investors are asking me, what about next year? Let's look ahead to 2026. Where will Adobe stock price be by the end of 2026? So that's the question I'll answer in this video. I'll look at a few estimates and I'll make a few assumptions and create a scenario analysis and present to you my price target for Adobe stock by the end of next year. To make this price prediction, I'm going to need a few data points, and that brings me to the sponsor of this video, Fiscal.ai. They aggregate a lot of financial information and brings it all in one place, and it saves me a lot of time. They also have a lot of data that's unavailable anywhere else. For instance, one of the numbers I need to make this stock price prediction is the estimates for earnings per share for Adobe in 2027. Fiscal.ai has this figure here. $26.16 is what the analysts that are following Adobe stock expect the company will deliver in earnings per share next year. I also need the company's forward price to earnings ratio, which I can also get at Fiscal.ai. As it stands, Adobe is trading at a forward price to earnings of 15.04. This is the lowest valuation according to this metric that Adobe stock has traded for going back many years. In this chart I've displayed here, you can see going back to 2023, investors have been unable to buy Adobe stock at a valuation this low. It's been one of the reasons why I've rated Adobe stock as a buy, and it's one of the reasons why I'm going to forecast Adobe's forward price to earnings ratio will trend higher by the end of next year. I'll also discuss some of the factors that's causing Adobe stock to trade at such a low forward price to earnings ratio. So what you're looking at here is my scenario analysis for Adobe stock for 2026. As I shared with you earlier, $26.16 is what the analysts on Wall Street expect this company will deliver in EPS next in 2027. The forward PE ratio, as we retrieved from Fiscal.ai, stands at 15.04. So if the company moves forward and things remain unchanged, the market values the company at a forward PE of 15, the stock price could rise to $393 per share by the end of next year, which would be a nice increase from the current share price of $343. And nothing will need to change. Adobe will just need to make progress and hit these earnings per share estimates and keep them where they are. So if things get worse, the earnings per share estimates will be revised lower, and that would mean that the share price is likely to underperform this estimate. But if things become better and the earnings per share estimates increase, then the share price could move higher. But if nothing changes, forward PE stays the same, earnings per share stays the same, the share price could rise to $393 a share. That's a nice upside here for Adobe. But what I'm forecasting, what I'm estimating to be more likely is the company's forward PE ratio increases. Now, if it increases to 17, then the stock price could rise to $444 per share. If it rises to 20, then the share price could rise to $523 per share. But it's not always upside, and there is still a downside for Adobe stock. And if the forward PE multiple were to decline to 12, then the stock price could fall to $314. Now, there are other scenarios where the stock price could fall even more, and there are scenarios where the stock price could rise even more. But those scenarios are not as likely as the four that I've highlighted here. These four scenarios I see as the most likely outcomes for Adobe stock next year. There are other outcomes. Now, the downside here would be an increase in competition rising from the rising effectiveness of AI and Adobe's inability to effectively invest in AI, and therefore losing market share to other competitors that are utilizing AI more effectively. In that scenario, Adobe's share price could fall more. And that's why, actually, Adobe stock price is selling as cheaply as it is today, is because investors are concerned about the rising effectiveness of AI and how it will impact Adobe's business. Already, you're seeing competitors gaining market share, growing revenue at a much faster rate compared to Adobe. I've done some videos about Figma and talked about how Figma is growing revenue at nearly 3 times the rate of Adobe. I've also talked about Canva and how Canva is effectively approaching the beginner customer and gaining those customers into its cohort. And so if those trends continue and Adobe fails to have an effective AI strategy, then things could get much worse from here. But I don't think that's the most likely scenario. I think the most likely scenario is Adobe keeps increasing its revenue, incorporating artificial intelligence into its services, and management taking notice of what's working at competitors and incorporating some of the best practices into its own business. Adobe generates very strong cash flow from operations, which it can use to invest increasing amounts in research and development and come up with effective strategies to deal with changing consumer behavior and the rising effectiveness of AI. All that being said, where do I think it's the most likely outcome for Adobe's share price by the end of 2026? Well, as I mentioned, I think there's going to be upward momentum to its forward PE ratio. And so I expect a range, right? I don't try and pinpoint the share price. That's very difficult to do. As you're seeing, I'm using several estimates and assumptions to make this price prediction. So I'm going to increase the chances that I'm effective or increase the chances that I'm right by forecasting a range rather than a point estimate for the share price. And that range, I'm forecasting somewhere between $390 per share and $440 per share for Adobe stock by the end of next year. As you can see, that's a very nice upside from the current stock price of $343. And it's in between the forward PE ratio of 15 and 17, as I highlight there. Of course, there's even more upside if the company incorporates artificial intelligence more effectively and the market prices the company accordingly. As those risks diminish, the valuation multiple could increase. Of course, the opposite is also true. If it fails to run an effective AI strategy and competition, the momentum gains steam and they start to take even larger share of Adobe's business, that could create more downside for Adobe stock. Overall, I like the risk versus reward for investors, and the upside here for Adobe is nice, and the downside here I think is relatively limited given its already very low, record low forward PE multiples. I have Adobe stock rated as a buy, and my estimate for 2026 suggests meaningful upside for investors in Adobe. Hey everyone, I'm excited to announce that my book is finally available for sale. I've been working on it for more than a year now, so I'm really excited to finally share this with you now. It goes through my framework for evaluating stocks. Some of you often ask why I like this stock or why I like the other stock, and this framework provides you the things that I look at when I'm evaluating stocks. I've added the link in the description below.